Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about my personal reading taste and the books that I lean more towards and the ones that I shy away from. As a reader, I've read a lot of different types of the same genre, and it's just now that I'm starting to really branch out into other genres. And so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about my personal taste and what I am more likely to pick up versus what I'm more likely to put down. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. Now, personally, the genres that I typically enjoy are young adult, fantasy, light romance. And what I mean by light romance is I don't really love insta-love. I don't like a whole lot of the raunchy romance scene. That's not usually something that I'll read. I'm definitely not against any of those books, but they're just not something that typically draw me. So I like romance, but I like it when it has a heavy influence with fantasy or a heavy influence with the plot summary. And so those are the genres that I am more easily influenced to read. There's definitely a lot of tropes that I don't like, and if I pick up a book and I read that it has something like that in there, I'm more likely to DNF it. I hate to say that, but that does happen quite frequently for me if I find something that I just can't stand in the plot. The basic plot tropes that I genuinely cannot stand are love triangles. I hate poor communication between the characters. I feel personally that I don't only read a book for romance, but the romance tropes that I don't like are what is more likely to make me not read the book or to DNF it. If there's things like lack of communication between the main characters for no reason, I'm going to DNF it. That drives me absolutely crazy. When there's absolutely no reason to make two characters long distance and they decide to do it anyways and only reunite them at the very end of a book, drives me nuts. I feel like it's a huge clickbait in a lot of ways where I'm reading it because I want to see what's happening and they're not even together. So that drives me crazier than I feel almost any trope when they're just not together for absolutely no reason. And then I can't focus on the plot because I'm so busy wondering, like, when am I going to see them together again? Ever? Another thing that I don't like to read in books are random point of views from characters that I'm not really tied to. I have a hard time falling for secondary characters. I have a hard time caring a lot about secondary characters. So it takes a lot for me to be able to shift my focus from either the main character, the main character's love interest, or a character that for some reason I am just really feeling. I feel personally it takes a lot for me to shift point of views, especially from the main character or maybe from the main character's love interest. Those are usually the only two that I'm like, okay. Now, if it's in the very beginning of the book, that's something that I'll forgive more because obviously you usually have a prologue, which is from a different point of view, or they'll do it in a way that they're introducing the characters, but it usually drives me a little bonkers. I just don't understand why you're writing a book about a main character and I don't get to see them or hear from them or understand them. I feel like what happens a lot for authors is they get really excited about a character and it's not a character that I've personally fallen for or found a lot of interest in. And so then I'm reading a lot of chapters about a character that I never signed on for because the author's really excited to write about him, which I do think is really exciting, and I wish that that's something I could stretch my imagination further. I will say a book that's recently done that for me is The Night Circus. I read it about a week ago and it was amazing. That book takes place in all different types of point of views and from all different characters, and that's something that I loved reading. I thought it was so exciting and interesting and different, and it hooked me immediately from the beginning. Now, a book series that did it, and I still love the series, but I didn't quite love that aspect of it, is the Blue Blood series by Melissa De La Cruz. I do love those books and they're some of my favorite books, but even when I was reading them for the first time, I struggled jumping from character to character, and I had to find some way to tie myself to that new character in order to get through the chapter, because a lot of times the most important things would happen from a character's point of view that I wasn't necessarily tied, and then I would miss so much information that I wouldn't know what to do from there. Now, something that's recently shifted me more from my YA focused mind is the fact that I'm having a lot more frustrations with romances and the way that most authors tend to write young adult romances. I feel like in most YA books nowadays, and I could definitely be wrong, with most of them that I have read, there's definitely a math equation for the trilogy. So you start out, you meet the characters, you fall in love with them, everything's great. In the second book, there's some reason that they're separated. They introduce the love triangle. You're frustrated with that love triangle. At the end of the book, she does not know what she's going to do. And in the third book, she figures out who she wants to be with, and then she gets back together with them at the very end. And that is something that drives me insane. I feel like there's so many other ways in a book trilogy to keep things interesting versus just the will they, won't they of the romance. And so that is a reason why I've definitely strayed more from my YA roots, is because I've wanted to read something that's more developed in the relationship so I can focus more on the plot outside of the relationship. Now, I'm not tend to be drawn towards books that are set in the past. I am more of a present day, modern day kind of girl. Obviously, there are books that have tested that theory. I've read a lot of the Philippa Gregory's books about the different women who started up the Tudor ancestry lines. I read Infernal Devices, which I loved. I recently read The Night Circus, which was amazing. And then I read Shadow at Night, which was the book by Deborah Harkins that I reviewed in my last video, which was set in the past. And those books I really enjoyed. But I do find that it's more typical for me to pick up something that's set in modern day, including like more YA contemporary, modern day contemporary, or if it's set in a fantasy land, those are things that I'm going to be more drawn towards than just the classic, it's set in the 1500s or it's based off a person. Those are really difficult for me to get into. I would say my most challenging genres are going to be biographies, which I do read occasionally, but I really have to be interested in the person. Sorry, I switched the camera angle. I'm still kind of figuring out exactly what works best on camera for me. But the genres that I just typically can't seem to get into the most is biographies and nonfiction. They're just not my favorite. I will read a biography, I think once every year or once every 2 years. It's definitely something that I'm more interested in starting to read. So if you have any recommendations, feel free to put them down below, because I would definitely love to expand my taste to more nonfiction books than just the typical fantasy, YA, adult fiction books that I like to read. Now, as far as my reading taste, some of my favorite authors, my most favorite author is Gail Carson Levine. I absolutely love those books. The Ella Enchanted and, more importantly, the book Ferris are my favorite books. They're the first books that I really felt drawn to and the first books I ever really connected with. So those are my favorites. Then I probably love Meg Cabot. After those authors, I tend to just really kind of absorb whatever is in the genre that I've already listed. The thing that draws me most to a book is the plot. It's probably always going to be the plot, and then a little bit the cover. But my tastes are definitely more fantasy centered, and then I will read my share of Sarah Dessen books, which is more like adult contemporaries or young adult contemporary. So those are the things that I'm more drawn towards in a book. The things that I love most in a book are main characters who are really interesting and who have a lot more to offer than just the person that they're supposed to be with. That is why Divergent, which is kind of a unpopular opinion, is my favorite book in the Divergent series. It was really the only and the first book I really liked outside of the romance, which was really bizarre for me personally, but when I read it, I just really connected with Triss's character in the beginning. I really enjoyed watching her character arc. I thought it was really good to read it. I liked the different use of descriptions that the book offered. So that was one instances where I was reading a book and it wasn't for her romance with Four, and that's something that really excited me. But outside of that book, I tend to read a book if it has a good romance. It doesn't mean that I need the romance, but it just means that I'm more likely to pick it up and I'm more likely to enjoy it. But I like it when it's done right. I don't like romances that are extremely don't want to go off into a tangent there, but I want to go into a tangent. Romances for me are kind of like my safety blanket. It's like when I'm reading a book, I'm like, oh, okay, that's in there. Thank God. And then I can be like, oh, but what about that dragon? How are we going to handle that? But I can't really focus on the dragon if there's no type of romance for me to at least be like, all right, they're good. Everyone's happy. Everyone's dating. It's great. Now let's go to something else. So I do find that I like that in a book just to kind of stay secure in my reading. And one day I hope that that kind of molds and changes into something else, because it's definitely very difficult to find a romance that makes me feel like it's checked all of my boxes, because I feel very, very critical about them, but it's something that I also really enjoy in a book series. So I do find that it's really important to me that that is done right. I also really do enjoy the She's Chosen trope. I feel like it's really fun for me to read. I definitely like characters where the girl is the main heroine. That's something I've always identified with. That's why I love Buffy. That's why I love Charmed. That's why Netflix created a column for me that was female empowerment, and I've watched almost everything on it. Those are just the types of things that I'm going to be more likely to read. And so I've never had an issue with the she's chosen, she's different for some reason type of trope. I like it when there's something that actually makes her interesting besides whatever she's chosen for. I am kind of over the plain Jane, she doesn't feel beautiful, but every single person in the entire world thinks that she's the prettiest girl who's ever walked the earth. And I definitely don't love the same type of body type and the same style of girl that's in almost every book. I love the idea of the waif-like, big-eyed, brown-haired or blonde-haired girl who walks through and just wears whatever big baggy cardigan she wants to throw on. And she's basically the next, like, Sabrina. What I do wish for was that there was more inclusivity as far as the main girl heroine. Of course, I think any girl is beautiful. I think that the waif-like, big-eyed, brown or blonde-haired girl that, you know, gracefully walks through life and wears a huge cardigan and every single person in the world is like, she's the prettiest thing ever. Of course, I think that those girls are beautiful, but I definitely wish that there was a little more inclusivity as far as in the female characters and in the male characters, whether it be the race, the body type, having smaller eyes maybe. I just think that that would offer up a lot more character choices, and that's something that I would be more interested to read as far as the books that I pick up. But that's definitely something that I always kind of think about in the back of my head is like, is she though? I definitely plan on making another one of these videos the more my tastes kind of adapt, but for starting this channel, I just wanted to give some type of background as to what I like to watch and what I find I'm more interested in. So if you'd like to see another one of these videos in a while, please let me know. If there's any type of video that you would like me to make or something that you would like me to read, please comment down below. Feel free to give this video a like or a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.